Hello everyone, and welcome to this farm tour of Weston Spring Farm. So we're in the month of March. We're just past the equinox, so the days are longer than the nights now, and we're really feeling spring in the air. It's a really lovely sunny day on site today. Can't wait to show you around. So here's the map behind me. We're just at the gate, so we're right at the entrance to the farm. We are down here, and we're going to walk round clockwise. So I'm going to show you where we're going to have the kitchen garden and the solar barn, and then we're going to walk up to the market garden here, where you can see there's 9 blocks on the map, and we've got a little crop rotation there with roots and greens, and then there's also flower production, seed production, perennial herbs and perennial berries. And then we're going to walk up through the agroforestry alleys. So at the moment it's March time, so we're just preparing the ground. We've got the trees in over January and February. So we've planted thousands of trees, lots of fruit trees, apples, pears, plums, mulberries, damsons, figs, all sorts. So we're going to walk up through those agroforestry alleys, and the idea here is we've got crops growing between the alleys of fruit trees. So we've got usually a 30-metre gap or a 15-metre gap between rows of fruit trees, and that's where we'll grow our crops. And then on the edge of each of those crop alley blocks we'll have wildflower mixes. So that's kind of the general pattern. And then on top of that, as an understory to all of the fruit trees, we've got berry bushes, so watch out for them on the tour. So let's get going. I'm also going to show you what tools we use to manage the site, and just give you a bit of an idea of how we're growing as well as what we're growing. So here we are walking into the entrance, and the first thing you spot on arrival is we've got our hedgerows in. And we've had this deer fence put in from our neighbour, and it's a deer fence around the whole site, so that means we can protect the crops a bit better without having to use so much netting and other sort of methods of pest control. So it frees us up to start forest gardens, to have trees here, you know, without so many guards, although we have protected some from voles as well. But that's part of the reason for the deer fence. So we've got deer fence from locally coppiced chestnut wood, so it's untannalized, untreated, but it's really strong, lasts for, you know, more than 2 decades. So that's what we've got around the whole site, and we've put some bird boxes up around, which we'll see as we go. So the bird boxes are up and the deer fence. So once the hedgerow's grown up and established, it'll kind of replace the fence eventually over the years. And see our big compost pile behind us. So we've got this is like organic council green waste compost, lovely stuff, really good soil conditioner. So this is how we create a lot of our no dig beds in the market garden, which you'll see in a moment. So we had tons and tons of this dropped off, and the idea is that's most of the compost that we'll need for the next few years, because we have a permanent bed system. So we put lots of raised beds in at the start, and that enables us to grow in that ground over years with a compost mulch. So it means we don't have weed seeds germinating, and we've also got a really nice ground to sow seeds into. So behind me you can see our temporary site store with tools and all of our equipment. So we're kind of doing everything from this little shipping container at the moment. So with all the tree planting, we've had all the trees go through there. We've got our tools and equipment, everything really. So that's what we're making do with whilst we await for final stuff with planning. And so we just await. This space just behind me here is where the solar barn begins, and you can just see the market garden in the distance. But while we're here, I'll just quickly show you what are the main tools we use to cultivate here. So first we've got this is a tilther. So fairly simple bit of kit. It's you'll see it's got some small tines there, which are pushed around by an electrical drill, which we charge off the sun, and that preps the ground before we put a direct seeder through. So that will just cultivate the top couple of inches of soil, but it will prepare a really nice seed bed, and it will level it all out and make it really smooth and efficient for our next tool, which is the seeder. So this is a pinpoint seeder. So we pop the seeds in the top there. We push this seeder along the beds, and the seeds pop out those little furrows there. So that's the way we can seed, you know, multiple rows of crops in quite a fast and efficient way, quite simple tools. And then a slight upgrade of that is our Jang seeder here. You can just about see, so it's got 3 wheels, so this is for kind of more for our field scale crops, so we're going to use this for larger seedings because it's a bit more precise, it's a bit more sturdy, so it's a bit more suitable for our kind of alley block production, which is just past the market garden. And then of course we've got the broad fork. So you can see it's a bit like a fork, a little bit wider, and we use that to not to dig the soil, but we put the tines in the ground and then loosen up so it creates air bubbles and gaps and just aerates the soil, allows oxygen to come in, and that allows all of the soil life to feed off it. And so it's a really great tool to like loosen for compaction, for example. So it's a way we can have a kind of no-till system but still be able to, if there's a bed compacted that's quite clayey, we can still loosen it up a little bit without actually physically inverting and bringing new earth to the surface. So it's a way, it's much better for soil health. It's not really disrupting the fungal networks. It's just wiggling around in there to get oxygen to the soil and aerate it. And then here we've got the griddler. So this, see it's on a long handle there. So it's got 5 discs here, and then it's got cross beams as well. And what that does is effectively it marks out a grid to match our planting distances. So for example, if we're planting out a bed of beetroots on the market garden, we'll just run that griddler over it after using the tilther, and that will create a really nice grid for us to plant straight into or to seed into. So it means we can have really even spacings, and then when we come to hoe and weed, it's really quick and efficient. So that's the griddler, another one of our market garden tools. And I won't go through the others, but we've got various hoes, wire weeders, and the more well-known spades, rakes, things like that. And the key thing is most of the tools, they're fairly standardised to market garden beds. So most of them are the same width as our beds, so we can work very efficiently and just do one pass with the tool. So they're specialist market garden tools suited to this system. So that's how we can produce an abundance of crops, but also make it really economically viable as well, and just make our workload a lot easier, make it easier on our backs as well, and things like that. So there's loads of great new tools coming out with market gardening. We find we can run a lot of the farm off these simple tools, and you might see in the back of our lovely shipping container, we've got this. So it's a 2-wheel tractor. I don't know if you can see it very well. So it's got an engine on the front, so it uses a bit of petrol, and for that small use of fossil fuels we get a huge return, because we're using it to, for example, to mow, because we're going from pasture to crops. So we're using it to mow some of the field blocks before we prepare ground. We've also got a power harrow attachment, which effectively pulverizes the soil, and that's how we're going to cultivate some crops in the top alley blocks. So we're going to use the power harrow in the initial years to actually create a really nice seed bed for crops to go into. And the power harrow kind of works a bit of a more of a horizontal motion than a sort of a deep tillage turning. So we're using a combination of tools, but that power harrow is going to be quite key. And you can see what these is another attachment, it's the flail mower. So that can also mean we can kind of manage brambles and pathways. We can even mow down cover crops like green manures and put that fertility back into the soil. So there's always different little attachments that we've got. And that's basically it. We can run the entire 16 acres with those tools. So we've opted not to go for big 4-wheel tractors or machinery or anything for issues of compaction, greater fuel use, less accessible machinery, cost of fuel, all these sort of things. So we've gone for small tools, intermediate technology. So that's how we're aiming to run this system. So now we'll go for a little walk around. Now you've seen our tools, now you've seen our entrance, seen our deer fence, got our delivery bike just behind me as well. So that's what we pack the veg into and deliver around Bath. We've got 3 bikes like that and 1 larger trailer trike. which is a 3 metre long flatbed trailer. So we're just walking up to the market garden here, and whilst I'm here, I'll just point out that this would be the end corner of the solar barn here. So you can see it's reasonably close to the entrance where that gate is over there, and you can see from our plans this is where the sort of L shape begins. And part of the reasoning for that is because our market garden and the real centre of it begins here. So there's a workflow process where we're coming out with the crops for veg boxes, and we're harvesting the crops from the ground. So for example, we can see some beetroots in here, some of the first plants to go in. So we're harvesting those crops from the ground and then walking down the path towards where this solar barn will be. And that's where we'll have firstly a wash station to wash the veg, then we'll have a pack station, and then a cool room. So that'll all be run off the solar, and then we'll load it into the bikes, and then they'll deliver off. So there's a bit of a workflow from the market garden, which takes us through that L-shaped barn and then outwards. So that's part of the design. And the barn will also be used obviously for processing fruit, all sorts of things, storing our tools and everything that are currently rammed in that tiny shipping container, having a bit of a shelter for tea breaks. We've had quite a lot of volunteer days here in torrential rain, and everyone's braved it very well, but we've been limited on sheltered space, but hopefully the weather's getting better. It's certainly beautiful today. So here we're in the middle of the first couple of blocks of the market garden. So remember from the map on the gate, we've got those 9 chunks, and here we've got, you can see the scale of it. So this is just one of the chunks, and there's Spud running around. Oh, he's actually using the path, that's good. He tends to just run right across the beds. So here's our first block from the market garden. So you can see we've been busy over winter, moving all of that compost from near the entrance, laying down the wood chip in the paths, and this is what we come up with. These are our permanent beds. This is the compost, and these are our broad beans in, quite early crops. Here's Sammy behind me.
Hello.
How you doing?
All good, in the beautiful sunshine.
Anything for the virtual tour?
It's nuts that I'm in 2
Nice.
places at once.
Nice new hat.
Yeah, got a new hat. That's
Sammy's got a new hat.
No, yeah. I don't know. What have you sold them so far?
Loads.
Cool. Well,
Just market garden tools.
I'll let you guys get on with it then.
Yeah, we're just
See you in a
sorting
bit.
out irrigation and everything. We've got this new systems in with our sprinklers, and we're just working on getting the right water pressure.
Yeah,
And,
which is a bit of a
preparing a bit of ground, and it's the day before the equinox party, just so you know where where we're at. Alrighty, see you soon. You might be in the room as you're watching this. That's a strange thought, isn't it? Right, so here we are. So this is our first block of market garden. So as you can see on the map, so we had this rotation of greens and roots. So in this block we've got mainly greens. So we've got already got probably well over 1,000 heads of lettuce. We've got a lot of peas, a lot of broad beans, a lot of parsley. Pak choi's gone in, and then if we rotate round, then this is our second block. So you can see that path down the middle kind of splits the 2 market garden blocks, and these are our other beds. So it's tons and tons of compost been put on, and that creates a really deep mulch, which is really gives a really great, amazing start for these plants. And it also means we haven't needed to till or prepare the soil really anyway. We've had some tarps on before, which we grew squash, which you might remember. And then what we've done is we've taken those tarps off, and then we've layered up a good 10 centimetres of compost, and the same for the pathways. And we've made them at the widths of our tools, of course. And then that's how we've created these permanent no-dig beds. And then by the time that compost has settled down, a lot of the weeds from underneath and the grass has died off because it's had this thick mulch on top. So then we've got a permanent growing system that's very productive. It's not requiring tilling and cultivating the soil, every few months or even every year. It's like we don't have to do any of that. It's basically just planting, harvesting, using the tilther, using the rake, using the griddler, and then we plant again. So we can direct sow or transplant into these beds quite quickly. So here we've got, there's several hundred bunches of beetroot in here, so that'll be for our first veg boxes, and also the broad beans and peas and salads will all be an early crop as well. And then over the coming weeks, and hopefully by the time we get to the physical farm tour in a few weeks, you'll see there's loads more crops coming in here. So we'll have all the root crops, and then with the carrots, the turnips, and then we'll have all of our summer veg coming through. So lots of beans, courgettes, squash, brassicas, kale, everything like that. So that's what we're doing. We're gradually planting up all of these lovely prepared beds that we've been working on over winter. And then you can see up here is kind of the space that we've got yet to do. So this is one of the tarps I mentioned. So it's a kind of it's a green bit of landscape membrane, quite a large one. You can still see the holes where we had planted the squash just there. So we grew tons of squash here last year, and now underneath those tarps we've got nice clean soil to work with and to make new beds on. And behind me here you can see the grasses that we've been mowing with the flail mower. And this is all of this area is the area that we're going to be making over the next few weeks. So you can see a little bit behind me the 2 blocks of market garden, and then up here are the next set of blocks. So there'll be more crops going in here as we progress throughout the season. And then as we head up towards the agroforestry system, so now we're walking up clockwise around the land, you can see the deer fence and the hedgerow in the boundary behind me. And then as we walk up, we move from the market garden, which is quite high intensity, lots of crops in one space, so really make the most of that small space, because we've got these great, no-tig bed systems. And then as we move up into the field blocks, we'll get to much bigger scale. So each field block is almost the size of one whole of our market gardens. So at this scale, we manage the land slightly differently, and this is where the 2-wheel tractor comes in. And the power harrow, and this is where we also begin with our fruit trees. So as we move away from the kind of the zone 1 of the site, which is our area closest to the barn and closest to the entrance, as we move away we move more towards perennial crops as we go a bit further away. So we're hoping to shift more and more to perennial crops like berries, fruit trees and nut trees as we go on. And then in terms of the pattern here, we've got a pattern design because we've taken this permaculture design process. So we've got a pattern which includes alley rows of fruit trees. So behind we've got these, let's see, one with actually some tree coming out of it. So these are our quince trees actually. So these are the first ones. We've got quince, medlar and mulberry in this line. So this is the first line in that orchard. So this is the main orchard just above the market garden, and we've got rows of fruit trees, quince, medlar, mulberry, and then in the understory beneath those fruit trees we've got berry bushes. So this is red currant. So the pattern is we've got, for example, a medlar tree and then a red currant, medlar tree, red currant, and that forms one long line. It's 120 meters line. So you might see behind me some of the fruit trees. So we've got a long line of them, and that makes up our first orchard row. So we've got berry bush, fruit tree, and what that does, it means we've got the fruit trees as they mature and they come into the canopy space. We've got berry bushes growing beneath them, so the berry bushes will crop for 7 to 10 years or even more, and they'll be growing out as the fruit trees establish and develop, because the berry bushes don't need full sunlight. They'll actually thrive off a little bit of shade, so the fruit trees and the berry bushes will help feed into each other basically. So it's maximizing that space, but it's also finding those little niches and symbiosis between the different plants. And then to add to that, we've got the next layer down in this kind of food forest agroforestry design after our row of fruit trees. So we've then got a 2 meter strip, which you can't see at the moment because we're in March, so we're just getting ready for it. You've got a 2 meter strip out from the fruit trees, and that 2 meter strip will be wildflower and pollinator strip. So we've got some Cotswold wildflower mix to sow into there. So we'll prepare the ground, we'll cultivate that, and then we'll sow the wildflower seed in, and then that will be largely perennial flowers that will stay there, and it will just be an undercover. So it'll be underneath all of those fruit trees, and instead of having, you know, just grass there or like one species, we'll have dozens of different species that are all providing different benefits to the farm. So we'll have different flowers, different pollinators, different things that are going to bring a whole load of things across those crop fields, and it'll be you know, birds, species, wildlife that will actually manage our organic system for us. Basically, that's the idea. It's kind of integrated pest management. So we'll have all those species and that biodiversity coming across the fields, and then pollinating all the fruit trees, but also doing our pest control and pest management, so that, you know, we have the blue tits that eat the caterpillars, etc., that caterpillars that eat the kale, so it reduces those problems, so we can then grow without any chemicals, without fertilizers, things like that. So as you see, we're walking up now to the second row, so you can see